Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Podcast, episode 133. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And we have a super interesting episode today. This one came out of the blue while we were working on the conspiracy of time-traveling thieves. We're going to be looking at every faction's oldest kits and other weird data surrounding the creation of kits.
Yeah, this definitely was one of those, moments as we were doing other research, and should be interesting to dive a little bit further.
So without any further ado, let's jump in.
Sounds good.
Hey, before we get into the episode proper, let's just stop for a second. I've got a secret for you. We recorded an extra episode last week because we decided that trying to live stream for an entire evening and then turning that into a giant video episode wasn't enough work. So right now, if you need 2 more hours of us talking, you can get it. You don't even have to pay for it. The way it works is I am posting an unlisted YouTube episode that is us doing a tier list of all of our video episodes. It was a very fun recording, going through, remembering how things went on certain weeks, all that. If you're interested in something like that, the way you find the video is go to our Patreon and become a free member. You just, subscribe to us as a free member on Patreon, and it will unlock a post that you can go click on, and it will have the link in it that you can go watch on YouTube. It's patreon.com/SullySingleton. There's a link below. As for why I'm doing it this way, I'll be very upfront with you. I figured this is kind of a win-win. If you're a fan enough to care about us tier listing our own content, you probably want to know when new episodes drop, and becoming a free member on Patreon means you get a notification whenever I post episodes, because we post them on our Patreon too, and you'll get a notification for it. Also, it means when we post bonus content at the end of the year for all of our patrons, it may finally put you over the edge and go, damn, maybe they are worth a couple bucks. So all around, it should be a win-win for those who want that type of content. But it is up there for free. You can go grab it. And if you hate this idea, you could instantly unsubscribe. I'm not going to blame you. But it's up and available for those who are interested. I just wanted that out of the way. Also, we've got merch on Orchid 8. Go buy it. There's a link below. Have fun. So before we make our way through each of the factions and get into the data itself, we should talk about how we found this data, what we're pulling from, what we're not pulling from, which is a very important discussion.
Story time on that one. We were doing the research for the other episode, the Time Traveler one, and it was all right, let's take a look at what dates were kind of thing for the first releases and that kind of stuff. Obviously, that should be easily findable on the internet, probably a wiki, right?
For a game with multiple wikis, you would expect this would be a simple Google search. Hey, when was the first time a Tyranid warrior existed? What do they all look like throughout the history of 40K?
And it's a fairly popular game. This isn't some 100 people in the world have ever played it.
No, competitively it is, but as a game as a whole,
yeah, it sells models. That assumption was laughably wrong.
We could not find any clean database, like a wiki, where you could click and go, show me the models of this range that currently are sold by GW, when they entered the market, what the previous iteration of this was. Things, even codex release dates are a little bit difficult, partly because factions have changed names multiple times too.
But those are findable, but what are the Orc Boys' original release date?
What is the release date of the last version of the Rangers, not the ones that just came out for Eldar?
Right.
We have it now.
Mostly.
Partially. Not even mostly.
Yeah, a large portion of it has been done.
There was a poster on Reddit, after a lot of searching, named Often Sarcastic, who has a Google Doc. And this Google Doc is updated from, it looks like they started sometime in 8th or 9th edition and have been updating all the way through the beginning of 10th, but not caught up completely to date right now. Good enough for us to work with. And it's very shocking that there's no easy way to go look at previous models or find out the history of a model range or know how old a model you're looking at is.
This Google sheet is a great starting point kind of thing because we were starting with basically nothing, but it only really shows here's the date, the model, and then what type of fine cast plastic, metal, whatever, and then some notes depending on whatever seemed useful at the time, I'm sure.
Here's one for you just to prove how weird this is. Assuming you're not ancient, can you tell me which is older, the body of the Wave Serpent or the Rhino chassis or the Land Raider chassis? Which of those three is the the oldest? Which one is second oldest? Which one is newest?
I think the Land Raider is the oldest, because I vaguely remember seeing that when I was doing some research on naming.
Which one is the newest of the three?
I want to say it's the Rhino, but that feels wrong, because
Because the Rhino's a box?
yeah, basically.
Are you ready for the real answer? Of those three, the Wave Serpent chassis is the oldest. It's from 1997. This is where we got into the weird stuff. So there's plenty of very interesting data that's just very hard to look up.
And the other thing on this mattered to us because we were doing some research. So we needed just like model name, date. But generally, I feel like people would be more interested in also having a picture. This is what it looked like when it was released on this date. There's a new version. It was released on this date, and this is what it looks like now.
Especially because there were a bunch of people in the comments of that episode going, oh man, you should have brought up the 3rd edition Hormagaunts or whatever it was. And I'm like, I've never seen those, and trying to Google them is a pain in the ass. GW doesn't even like telling you what edition it is as a reminder. It is almost never stated by Games Workshop what edition you are playing a 40K. The players will tell you we are playing 10th edition. Technically on GW's website, on their merch page, it is labeled as 10th edition.
But in none of the like descriptions, it's not like this was released for 10th edition.
And you will not find it on your cover for your codex. You will not find it on the cover for the core fucking rule book.
These are things that, like, as somebody trying to collect an army, I would be interested in easily finding the history and options of a particular model. I understand that Games Workshop's shop store isn't going to show you the model that was discontinued in 1990. They don't want you to know about that one. They just want you to buy the latest one. Understandable. But there should be something to exist that we can find to that.
There should be a community picking up the torch there and adding it to wikis and updating them and making them a useful thing instead of somewhere to get bad pieces of lore that are usually inaccurate. Which I have a very fun anecdote for a future episode, but we'll come back to that later. For now, let's get into the actual data.
All right.
So the current year, Eric, can you check the calendar for me?
Yeah, let me pull it up in Windows. Yeah, 2024.
Okay. It is currently fall of 2024 when we record this. Some of the models we're talking about can have fought in a war, ordered beer, had a mortgage. We're going to be discussing dates where the model's back hurts.
They've passed the threshold for cheaper insurance.
But we're not going to see that right away because we're starting with Space Marines. And it's the most boring data because, spoilers, everything is new because they're always getting something new because that's how a subscription service faction works.
Yeah, I mean, they've still got some old stuff, but like they have so many new things that like it just keeps getting refreshed essentially.
So we kind of gave it away, but the oldest currently legal model is the Land Raider from the year 2000.
That's old.
It's getting up there.
It feels like that should have got refreshed since then.
It's in a weird spot. Let's talk about the oldest models. Ready? You've got the Land Raider, the Dreadnought, the original Box Dread, and the Rhino, and the Predator, etc.
Those are all pretty iconic, right?
They are iconic in an old Marine iconic way, yes. But old Marines don't exist anymore, and it's pretty funny for a perfectly timely example. Playing through Space Marine 2, there's Primaris stuff all over the place, and it all mostly looks correct. This is all thematically tied in together. Like, everything looks like it belongs there. Until, for some reason, they use one Rhino once and one Predator off to the side in, like, a later stage of the game, and they look so horribly out of place. They look like toys next to everything else.
You can like walk up kind of close. It honestly looks like it's like a shrunk down version that you would give to like a kid that's like, you know, one of those like super rich bratty kids that you're like, I'm gonna get you a car because you're not old enough yet. It looks like one of those. It's fucking hilarious in how stupid it is.
The problem I have is it's very clear that these would have been put out to pasture if the Impulsor had been better. It's true. The Impulsor Repulsor is clearly meant to be your Rhino equivalent for Primaris, but no one liked them. So we will most likely get the updated Rhino, the updated Predator equivalent, which the Predator could just die, to be honest.
I think that one could go away and you could do a new...
It's there as the strap onto the Rhino. Like, no one's like, the Predator is so iconic. It's like, it's a Rhino with a turret.
Yeah. And like, I mean, they did kind of like a new release on the Land Raider with the Crusader.
Yeah, but it's pretty clear that these will be updated again in a more modern era look.
I would hope so.
There will be a lot of people who are like, oh my god, it's beautiful. They updated the classic. They kept these design features based off the original 1992 Land Raider that looked like two donuts and a thing between them. Whenever they do it, we will find very quickly that the oldest currently playable Space Marine model shoots up by like a decade.
Yeah, I think so. Especially because they're getting rid of so many of the old things. It makes sense that, like, honestly, they are moving towards a new era. And these are just ones that have kind of been left behind.
Yeah, like the next oldest legal thing at this point is the drop pod from 2008, or like one of the planes from like 2012, or the Centurion from 2013. You will find that anything older than like 2010 has been replaced with very specific exception cases of the Rhino, the Dread, and the Land Raider. And the Dread is really weird because I'm pretty sure the one that is still sold is the Venerable Dreadnought that got renamed to Dreadnought, which the Venerable Dreadnought is 10 years newer.
I know that they sell the Venerable Dread. I just don't know if they still sell the old one as well.
One of the two got killed. I think it was the original got killed, the Venerable stayed, and the Venerable got renamed to the original. Rules-wise. There's just Dreadnought now. There's no longer Venerable Dreadnought, but it includes everything Venerable Dreadnought used to have.
That's not confusing at all.
And they killed Ironclad and all that stuff.
If only we had like a wiki that would make it easier to reference these kinds of changes.
All right, so let's actually cover all of our special Snowflake Marines this time. Normally, I would brush over them, but it might be interesting. So first up is Blood Angels, and we'll just spoil the codex for anyone who hasn't seen the spoilers yet. Everything has been updated or has been removed, with the exception of the Ball Predator from 2010.
To be fair, 2010 was like their release essential. I mean, that is a long time ago, but like in the frame of reference of 40K, it's not that long ago.
It's pretty long, especially because it was I will say anything that is pre-2017 clearly has the old design philosophies of just sculpt a brick.
There definitely are distinct eras of design choices for the models.
Basically, when AOS started like realizing you could put design work into things.
Yeah, that's fair.
Unfortunately, some of that was forgotten with the Blood Angels update, but as long as you're a fan of no wings and more ball gags than you thought you would want in a Space Marine army, then it's all updated.
Yeah, I don't get that no wing thing, but...
Oh, but the ball gag part was fine. Lamarty's, he's just a little kinky.
I mean, that happens. I'm not going to shame, but losing your wings, I am going to shame. That was dumb. I mean, at least the Ball Predator is plastic.
Yeah, it's a Predator with a different gun.
Yeah, but like, you know, updating and getting rid of the fine cast, they could have done better.
Luckily, there's 45 other sub-factions you can play. So for Dark Angels, the line is very new. Everything's been updated quite recently, partially due to the line returning.
Yeah, I was going to say they got a pretty big, like, we're going to do a refresh because there's a new big thing happening, which is great.
With a few exceptions. So we've got Samael from like 2007 still exists, even though like land speeders don't. A little strange.
And I think still fine cast on that one, so I wouldn't be surprised if that one either gets an update or goes away soon.
But there's one a little older.
Just a tad.
Pushing is one of the oldest models to still have rules. Somehow, as a Space Marine, we have Ezekiel, straight out of the Old Testament of 1996. January 96. Barely in 96.
Fucking metal motherfucker, dude.
Not even fine cast. I assume because there was something wrong when they tried to fine cast the metal mold. He is still metal to this day.
Absolutely baller. In like the worst ways.
So yeah, very weird that they decided to keep having rules for him instead of just shelving him. Dark Angels players are psychos though, so like I guarantee there'll be a 5-paragraph essay on why Ezekiel is too important and is more important than every Xenos faction, and you cannot get rid of Ezekiel because something.
And like, I mean, sure, that's fine. But it's weird then that they didn't update him. They've been doing a bunch of updates and refreshes, and like the lion just came back, so there is some hype.
Eric, they updated like 9 characters. The problem is there was 15.
I'm assuming this was in progress or something like that, and it just didn't make their like deadline, or like something happened. Because 96, man, it's metal. Maybe it's just because he actually doesn't matter even for GW and they forgot about him. I don't know, man. It's absolutely wild to have a model that old.
In Space Marines.
And of a section of Space Marines that they clearly just did a big push on. Completely unexpected. This blister contains 1 metal Ezekiel, Grandmaster of Librarians. This finely detailed Citadel miniature is armed with force. Model supplied with a 25mm round base.
He has a 25mm base?
I mean, not in rules, he's a 32 because...
Oh, okay.
Obviously, he's a 32. But he comes with a 25.
A Space Marine character should be out of fucking 40.
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh.
You sure he's not a Votan model?
He probably would fit in perfectly, size-wise.
All right, real quick, let's look at Space Wolves. Which of these 35 currently legal Space Wolf only datasheets are we going to say is the oldest?
Well, there are a couple that came out roughly the same time or the same time.
I'm going to assume since they're all from the exact same month, they were probably a release.
They were all the way back in 2009, so not completely certain on what happened all the way back then. But yeah, we've got Canis Wolfborn, Jal Stormcaller, Lucas the Trickster, Wolfguard and Terminator, and then the like shared Blood Claws, Grey Hunter, Wolfguard thing.
Yes, the Space Wolves kit.
Yeah, a couple fine cast, but 2009.
And they looking at these models right now, our buddy has a Stormcaller and he looks heinous. His is secondhand. We got it from an eBay bid, and this thing, you can barely tell it's a Space Marine.
Yeah, I feel like it's not that crazy to see some of these older character. Obviously, they're starting to, re-update and remove a bunch of the old fine cast, but that's going to take some time. So I'm not shocked. I am kind of amazed that like the main Space Wolf kit thing is still from 2009.
Space Wolves is weird because almost the entire unique Space Wolf army is all pre-Primaris stuff, because their big newest update to Space Wolves was the absolute last Space Marine release before Primaris in 2016.
Yeah, and we all love the Wolfen.
What a great design. This is why 2017 is the line.
Yeah, I feel like they really should update that shared kit, but it kind of feels like the whole army just needs the update, right?
Space Wolves needs their time, like the Dark Angels just got, where they've got their big 2 releases probably to do half A, half B update to get all of their special stuff updated.
Yeah, because basically every model is from 2009, 2012, or 2014, 2016. That's when the models were released.
All right, that does all the first founding chapters. For the supplementary ones, we've got Black Templars existing. Spoilers, their oldest model came out at the same time as the rest of their models because the entire range was updated in 2021 against every better judgment. So Black Templars completely updated, and it will be years before we have any hope of them getting squatted, as much as the universe would be better for it.
Wow.
And as one last Space Marine thing, let's spend 2 seconds here looking at the subfaction formerly known as Deathwatch, now part of Imperial Agents. The entire range came out in 2016 in the exact same release. This is how you got the Corvus Blackstar, the Kill Team, the Watchmaster. That's it.
You only have so many models. They all came out at the same time. 2016 isn't that long ago.
It is actually slightly newer than the Space Wolves that came out earlier that year, right before we got Primaris.
I feel like some of them have like this oh, they're kind of an older kit, but it's just because they were in that older design, but they were like the very end of it. So like they are nice, but like they're in a different style kind of thing. Given the codex, like I don't expect much change anytime soon.
And real quickly into the rest of the Imperial Agents, I'm pretty sure the last thing that hasn't been thrown into the void, goodbye Jakero, is Greyfax from 2017. So the 4 assassins are truly the oldest kit in Imperial Agents.
Yeah, from 2015, which that's a bit old, but still hanging on.
So let's move on to Sisters. It's going to be rather uninteresting because, spoilers, it's an 8th edition army. There are obviously like the old metal versions of things, but those have all been updated or sent to Legends. The oldest model is Saint Celestine, who is technically older than the Sisters release. She's from 2017.
The army was basically released in 2020, and then I'm sure that there was a reason that Saint Celestine came out earlier, some type of like promo or something like that, but 2017 is not bad, so very obviously a new faction.
Yes, beautiful the whole way through.
Yeah.
It will shock nobody that the most beautiful of the Imperial Guard's models, the Catachan Jungle Fighters, may be the oldest thing in Guard. From 1999, it's impressive how poorly they've held up. You'd think they were from 1906.
I have faith that the Reddit user, often sarcastic, did a lot of work. It feels like the Catachan Jungle Fighters was from earlier than 1999, right? Like, I wonder if they like mistyped it in or something like that, because wow, 99 is a long time ago, but these are impressively old looking models.
It's interesting to me that, like, looking in the older stuff, the Baneblades from 2007, and you get all the way down to, like, 2010 before you get to, like, the Lehman Russ, the Chimera, and all that. The Manticore, which I've heard is a horrendous kit to actually put together. The modern Basilisk, like, all of the tanks we think of are from, like, 2009, 2010 era. And technically, the Baneblade is older than all of them by a couple of years.
I think that whole era, like 2007 to 2010, all of those tanks had, like, a pretty similar feel. And honestly, they're pretty good for, like, you know, being a Guard tank. It doesn't have to be like this like super hover tank kind of technology. It's like, nah, it just looks like a tank.
They've all got the very heroic scale. Everything's too chunky for its size. Like,
and I think that does work even in, you know, the more modern era.
You say that, but like putting it next to the Dorn is clearly a better design. The Baneblade gets away with it because the Baneblade is so large that you don't notice the weird scaling as much.
That's true. But like these ones aren't quite as bad as the Space Marine ones.
No.
And part of it's just because like Guard models next to it are gonna fit a little bit better. But like 1999.
The current Ratlings, which are metal, are from 2009.
That doesn't seem right.
They are the replacement Ratlings. I know that.
Yeah.
There were older ones. Why did you bother making that kit?
I mean, I don't really understand why they were still making metal stuff in 2009, but
that's an interesting one I'd love to know the story on. I can kind of understand the Primaris Psyker and stuff that came out at the same time. Is it like, okay, singular character, at the time they tended to be Finecast. For some reason, a lot of these are metal still, which from what we've seen, Finecast was a thing before this by several years. Why were these ones metal again?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming that like whoever was designing at the time didn't design it for Finecast methodology, and it was designed for metal.
Was it part of like some promo? They were for a White Dwarf mail-in order thing or something?
That would be funny. But like the Ratling, why them? If you're gonna do that, then just have the characters. But very weird. It would be interesting to actually hear from people that like were into 40K at the time, like what the hell happened and why did they release Ratlings in metal in 2009?
All right, let's move on to AdMech real quick. The oldest one is either using the Finecast servitors from like 1993, technically, though there are updated ways to get newer servitor sculpts, or just saying it's the original release of like the Skitarii and stuff in 2015.
It's the original release of the Skitarii and all of those.
And the Castellan robots, I'm sure they're going to expand that part of the range at any moment in like 2016 or 17, right?
It's been primed for long enough, and clearly there is interest, so like it wasn't a failed experiment. It's just a matter of time, really. I figure we give them a couple more years. A decade's pretty reasonable.
It's a good turnaround time for a small billion-dollar company.
Please understand, the last time that they were remodeling it, they were planning for it to be in metal.
They wanted that authentic robot feel. A 40-pound mini. It falls over and crushes your opponent when it explodes.
wizard chests.
All right, let's move into Custodes. It's the Land Raider, technically, if you want to just say that. Or the Contemptor Dread, which again predates the army, but like it's the Custodian Guard release, like the original release in 2017 and all of those units, like the Shield Captain and all of that.
Sisters of Silence, they got their army in 2017. Sure, I mean, obviously they looked very small for what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, like this was the Forge World range, right, of plastic. It's pretty clear they were not meant to be put next to the Primaris era stuff that was coming out at the same time. Custodes always look strangely smaller than they should.
Which is disappointing. They're like supposed to be super elite and like awesome, and like all the rules are like, wow, they're awesome, and you're like, they are kind of cool. They're a little short though.
Part of it is their shoulder pads do them no favors.
That's true.
I always, every time I look at their basic troops, I get the picture of like wearing dad's suit. All of their stuff looks so much bigger than their bodies. Why are their shoulder pads half of the length of their arm?
It's a look.
It's a look. Why bananas?
It's good for your health. But yeah, I mean, there's honestly not much to say about them. Like, they got their army in 2017, and they've got a bunch of other fine cast stuff that like needs to be sorted.
Now, would you like to talk about the oldest Imperium range, barring random one-offs from each of these other armies?
Sure. Let's talk about Grey Knights.
They're so small.
Like, they're good kits from like an aesthetic. If you don't compare them to anything else, they look good.
Part of it is that Terminator look is the best Terminator look.
I think so.
So the fact that it like is scaled poorly doesn't hurt it as badly until you put it next to another model and you're like, why is the Space Marine taller than the Grey Knight and Terminator armor?
Yeah, when they clash with a Primaris and you're like, huh.
How's the weather up there?
Are you on one of those tactical rocks? No? Huh. I should get one of those, I guess.
Yeah, so this entire range, for the most part, like barring Land Raiders, all comes from 2011, and that is like the entire range of Grey Knights is 2011.
Yeah, there's been a few things here and there, and then like Crow 2021, but like the army was 2011.
Everything else is a character that was a one-off release after that. They are clearly set up for a full refresh. One of the older armies in general, for like how dated the average kit is.
Yeah.
If you want to get real technical, their oldest model is Brother Captain Stern, who technically I think is just called a Brother Captain model now. Like, I don't know if Stern still has a data sheet.
No, yeah, he's still got one.
Okay, so Stern technically predates everything at like 2003, but he sucks. Eric has that model and it's awful.
I was gonna say, like, I'm not a super fan of like what he's trying to do from rules wise, and like that model, it's awful. And like there's also like the whole servitors thing, and like, but the real thing is the army came from 2011. That's a long time ago.
Can we just appreciate that Kaldor Drago, your favorite melty face ugly mofo, is from 2011? It's just, this is the fine cast tax.
Yeah, not a big fan of him.
My wife hated that model, despised it while she painted it. She loves Drago because of memes from fucking TTS, and she hates that kit.
If it wasn't for the fact that like rules wise and lore, like from like a meta perspective, Drago's super cool. That model is probably the worst model I own.
What happened to your turning lion into a proper Drago? When are you gonna get around to that?
Probably never. Well, no, that's not true. No, if they do like refresh of, you know, Terminators, Paladins,
and then Drago's gonna be too small,
then I'll have to get those and like figure out paint scheme, and then like, you know, I'll have to like actually figure out how to do painting on my own for the army, at which point Drago's gonna look even worse, and I'll be like, I will take anything other than this, and I will deal with figuring out. Hopefully by then though he gets an actual model as opposed to this, but I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, if I'm being completely honest. It should, given 2011, but
all right. And then to wrap up the Imperial Knights, the oldest knight is the Knight Errant kit / the Paladin, which is from 2014. That is the moment when a lot of people became very angry that knights existed in tabletop.
And it's been a problem ever since.
The army is not many data sheets to begin with, and it's basically a kit in 2014, a different sprue in 2015 that was added onto it to get more data sheets, and then in 2018, like adding in the warglaves and like making it a real faction.
Yeah, it's a pretty new army, all things considered, but it could still use more. If we're gonna actually keep it as its own faction.
We just need the Cerastus frame to get fully brought into 40k so that we can have knights with proper legs.
Yeah, could work.
The Questoris legs are so sad. They're so sad.
Yeah, that wraps up Imperium, but let's just hit Chaos Knights since that's how most things work of Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights get linked together.
Okay, are you ready for this? It's real hard.
Yeah.
Chaos Knights poofed into existence in 2018. There we go. Before that, you just played a knight versus a knight and you said this knight, he's Chaos. The other knight, he's Imperium.
I put a spike on this one.
That was optional.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That was like overachieving status.
So 2018 is when that army existed. And then from there, it's gotten, all the new war dogs and Abominant and all that. But to get out of knights, let's hit up demons. This one is interesting.
I mean, demons is interesting just from like an entire aspect of demons is from like a different game essentially. So not that that's like the old or the oldest models, but a very interesting range in how things are released.
So demons are Warhammer Fantasy Battles / AOS models that are used in 40k because demons exist between the dimensions, or whatever you want to say for your fan theory. It will be no shock to anyone who has ever touched the Bloodletter kit that it is tied with Demonettes as the oldest kit, dating back to 2008 with mold lines to prove it. One of my least favorite experiences with a kit, you spend more time scraping mold lines than actually putting the kit together. Demonettes also aren't great and are even more fiddly, but they have less bad mold lines.
I was gonna say, they aren't quite as bad from what I've heard as the Bloodletters, but like, it's not like they're amazing.
No. It is funny that this is tied with the Soul Grinder, the 40k team's one attempt at making demons before everyone said, please don't do that again.
Yeah, never do this again. The thing is like, I could see that style working, but it just doesn't fit.
It belongs in Chaos Space Marines, not in Demons.
Yes, exactly. It's not Chaos Demons. It's very much a Chaos Space Marine with some fancy bits and whatever added onto it.
It's a demon engine, through and through.
So, like, it's always a bit out of place. 2008, though, I felt like Bloodletters was older than that.
No, and to be honest, the interesting thing is if you are on the AOS side of things, there are like all sorts of rumors that like, oh, the big update coming up will be Tzeentch because Tzeentch looks so outdated and old. And it's like Tzeentch is from like newer than Grey Knights.
I was gonna say, fuck you. Tzeentch is like spring chicken.
To be fair to AOS people, they have a much higher bar for making something look good than 40k people.
That is absolutely true.
They are right that Tzeentch looks pretty old and dated compared to AOS.
I mean, they've got a pretty new Lord of Change.
That's not the part that needs updating. The part that needs updating is the Flamer, which is one of the worst models ever to try painting because it has no details. It's just some glue that dried weird. Everybody universally hating the current iteration of horrors, including myself, even though I painted so many I'm going to cry when I have to do it again. It's a mess. I get why it's a common rumor in AOS right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I also feel like Slaanesh, but part of that's just because the Chariot's such a fucked up box.
Yeah, it is. You learning that on air was fantastic. I'm so glad that you accidentally guessed how it worked.
I'm still not convinced I understand. Yeah, it doesn't help that some of these old ones are compared to like newer AOS models, which are absolutely stunning. So yeah, there is some push I could see for updating like 2008, 2010.
I would love the Bloodletters updated, even though I just finished mine just because I hated that kit. And I want other people to suffer less.
Shocking that there isn't that much Finecast.
They were all characters and many of them are dead now. It was about 90% of our range as named characters. We still have a ridiculous number of named characters though.
I was going to say that's a whole Chaos Demon and even Chaos Space Marine thing of let's just give named characters all over the place and ignore having a full range.
Speaking of Chaos Space Marines,
how old do you think the oldest one is?
I knew before clicking on this page, I already could tell you it would be the exact age of the old Marine bikes. And it was, because it's the Chaos Bikers, and it is the ugliest fucking model in that range. Chaos Bikers, 1999. Boy, do they look it.
Holy shit, they're like actually buyable right now.
They're on the shelf at our LGS, Eric. You could go buy them right now on the way to my brother's house. Please do not.
That's not right. I'm looking at the actual sprues right here. That's not right. You should not be able to sell that.
They look like old Seraphon sprues where they're like the old, like there's 3 pieces of plastic on this sprue that are like super spaced out.
Yeah, exactly. That's that's the real teller of like, okay, there's only, 5 pieces that you put together. Fine. Okay. It's an older kit. The amount of like, we didn't understand how to do injection molding on these sprues is like, oh geez. 99, huh?
They predate the Land Raider.
That's fucking old.
They predate the Rhino by even more.
Oh Jesus.
Technically, if you want to get into it, like the Noise Marine ugly fine cast upgrades, that's like the cheap way to make Noise Marines right now.
Yeah.
Those are almost as old. They're from 2002. But again, there's like the promo Noise Marine who's much, much newer. But then you have to pay like hundreds of dollars for squads because I think it's like a $20 single model.
Something like that. It's honestly, just go print them. Find somebody to print them.
Or just wait until they get a proper release later this edition.
I was going to say, hopefully we're not going to get debated and we actually get an updated Noise Marine. Oh my God, if we don't.
I will say, the Defiler being from 2003 is shocking because of how awful it is.
Yeah.
Looking at everything else from the time period in Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines, it looks about as bad as that era of old Marines do. It's just the game moved on and this model remains.
And because of like its style and like, size and all that stuff, it feels like it's more of a standout outlier kind of thing.
I need to stop you. You said this thing's style. This thing has no style. It has no drip. It has no riz. This is the opposite of the word style.
Yes, you're not wrong, but like that in and of itself is kind of a style, right?
Children's toy from McDonald's is a style.
I feel like there are several McDonald's and Burger King toys from my childhood that I'd rather have.
Same. Dude, do you remember when they did like the gold Pokemon cards in the Pokeballs thing?
I've still got 3 of those, okay?
Yeah. I think that was Burger King, but still, it's better than a Defiler.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually kind of shocked that a bunch of these models were 2012. I thought they were older.
The 2012 era models, for those at home, this is like the Mauler Fiend, the Forge Fiend, the Helldrake, the Raptors. They hold up okay. They look like an older Space Marine model. Like something where I see the tactical Marine equivalents on the shelves, like in Space Wolves or whatever, and then I look at this and I'm like, this actually looks better. But it's Chaos, so of course it does.
I guess that's kind of the thing, is like I'm comparing it to like the newer Chaos ones that are like, oh yeah, that's got a lot of trim and fiddly bits. That's cooler, right? Yeah, not bad overall, but there's some need to update the Chaos Bikers and a couple others, but...
Or just get rid of them. Do we need them?
I don't think it's right, really, to remove non-characters from CSM at the moment.
Yeah, okay.
I understand what you're saying, but the CSM non-character range is actually not that big.
That's a fair angle. Okay, let me rephrase. Make me want you to update the Chaos Bikers. Make them good enough that I'm happy that they got updated.
That's fair.
We gotta do better than Outriders. It's a low bar. I believe in you.
That should be doable. All right, do we want to move into Death Guard or Thousand Suns next?
Let's do World Eaters. It won't take long.
All right.
So World Eaters, spoilers, it's Karn by a lot. He's from 2016. The rest of the range came out at the end of last edition. Karn is much smaller than everyone else he's surrounded by.
Great option to kit bash something and sink your teeth on kit bashing, I guess.
Remember him being from 2016 because it's going to get brought up again in a discussion in a moment. But first, let's talk about Death Guard.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the, Rhino and...
Yeah. We're ignoring all those. That would be a very boring list. Their actual oldest model is basically take your pick from the 2017 launch. At the beginning of 8th edition, they released Dark Imperium. It was the big Primaris moment, and we got the beautiful beautiful new Chaos Army of Death Guard. Well, gross, but like beautifully done gross.
Well sculpted.
So you could take your pick from the entire range there, like Poxwalkers, the Plague Marines, any of the characters.
Yeah, this is another faction that is very new, like Sisters, a little bit older, but same, like this is the new era of models. There aren't really that many old ones because the whole faction came into existence a little while ago.
Yeah, and Death Guard is the fall 2017 big launch. So like you can take your pick. There was so much. It's interesting because they've aged wonderfully.
And you say aged, but like
They're not that old.
they're not that old in relationship to 40K as a whole and, you know, a lot of these older factions.
To put it another way, they have not aged yet.
Yeah, give them another 3 years and we'll look at them as a decade old and be like, they're probably still okay.
Whereas a few months before them coming out, this was an interesting part of the data.
Yeah, Thousand Suns.
This is when I realized this was going to be an interesting episode. I did not know how Thousand Suns released exactly. I was aware they were the 7th edition punching bag thing equivalent to Death Guard was in 8th. That's wrong. They were released in the World Eaters slot of Shit It Out at the end of the edition 3 months before the edition change. They came out entirely in 2016/2017 over like an 8-week period at the end of the year there. 6 months before everyone would meet the Primaris Marines and buy those for the first time.
It really does show.
So when you put my models next to a Primaris Marine and you go, why are you so short? Someone had to do that in the dev period. These were developed in the same time frame. Everyone in the office would have known Primaris is coming.
It's not like Grey Knights, like they were designed well before Primaris was an idea. Fair enough. Thousand Suns, this feels malicious.
They're my favorite stock standard. The guy bitching that he hates monopose models and his entire army is the fucking A-pose bolter flat against the chest. The classic shitty old Space Marine look.
Yeah.
The whole army looks like that. It's fantastic. Our Terminators is 2 arms flat forward. You can either have it be up or down if you want him to have an angry arm or a normal arm. This range aged, unlike Death Guard. It's actually funnier too because when you look at the launch, in 2016, we got, well, it's the whole range. It's Magnus, Rubrics, Scarab Occult Terminators, the beautiful Exalted Sorcerer box, Zongor, and Ahriman.
And then you got some more Zongors a couple weeks or months later.
However, you have to remember, those Zongor were an upgrade sprue. They just have the chainsword and pistols that you could slap on the Zongor for fantasy/AOS. Technically, they're for AOS because they were the new Zongor. And then the 2017 models that came a few weeks later was just the Zongor Enlightened and the Zongor Shaman that released in AOS and were added into Thousand Suns post-mortem. This is the same for the Mutalith Vortex Beast, which was added to Thousand Suns. Technically, it's the oldest model in the range because it's from 2013, but like...
It wasn't a Thousand Suns model.
Right, it's like saying the Rhino is older.
Yeah. It sucks because there are some really nice looking models.
Yes.
It's just they have some of the problems, like you said, of like posing and all that stuff as like a fielded army.
It is the clear transitionary period from the worst design period to the more modern design period where things are really high quality compared to like looking at stuff from like the 2010s and the earlier than that.
Because like honestly, Grey Knights and Thousand Suns, when they're facing each other, look right.
Yeah, because they're both old Marine scale. Specifically like the 3rd gen old Marine scale because they kept like creeping the scale a bit.
It fits perfectly. It's just Grey Knights, 2011-ish era, makes sense. Thousand Suns, 2016.
December 2016, not 2016. Literally released and 6 months later you could play with Primaris.
That doesn't seem right. And that definitely doesn't help the whole, like, expectation to get updates, right? Because, like, at least for Grey Knights, I could be like, well, it's well over a decade old.
Yeah.
It can probably get an update, right? Like, you've let it cook out there. It's about time. We're not at a decade old for Thousand Suns.
The argument for Thousand Suns is just, we look a lot worse than the other ones do. Like, when you put them next to the other Chaos God ones, it's like, look at those beautiful new Khorne Berserkers. Look at the beautiful Death Guard.
One of these is not like the other.
Thousand Suns, A-posing bull bolter against chest.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's real tough.
It was very interesting to look at it from a date standpoint and see how egregious it was. I knew that Thousand Sons players were annoyed that, like, we were the only ones who are pre-Primaris, so we're the ones that, like, look the worst of all of them. But that's always the case. Being older, you will always have, you know, like, the progression of skill.
I was going to say, the expectation is, as, you know, a team has more experience and you've tried other things, you've learned, it means that, like, yeah, there's going to be improvement. Maybe there's a bad model every once in a while, but steady improvement as a whole is the expectation.
But knowing that Plague Marines and all of that stuff was probably sitting in a file next to it is upsetting.
It was absolutely being worked on at the same time at some point.
Yeah, it was probably in the concepting phase while the other was finalizing, yes.
Yeah, which, oof. That's about all that can be said on that one.
All right, let's talk about Emperor's All right, let's move on to Xenos.
Hopefully we'll have something to talk about Emperor's Children sometime.
Technically, your oldest model is Lucius, because he's your only model.
Yeah. Aeldari.
So Eldar, I do want to split up. We're going to do the Nada factions, so we'll do Craftworld first. Craftworld obviously has the most talking points because this is the famously old faction. A lot of stuff got updated, but a lot of stuff didn't because they were a large faction. So going back, no one will be shocked to find out that the Warp Spiders and the oh so beautiful Phoenix Lords are the oldest models by a very fair margin.
Those fantastic Finecast things.
Things. Yeah, they're hideous. 1994. They are as old as my brother. They are older than Bricky.
And he's fucking ancient.
Yeah, as we discussed the other week, he's ancient now.
Yeah.
It is crazy how old some of the Eldar kits are. When you see it written out, you're like, wow. Some of the more impressive ones aren't just the oldest. Like, everyone knows those are terrible, right?
Yeah, but, like, the thing is it's not just one. Like, it's like, oh, there was one model from 1994 that just, like, has been slipping through the cracks. There's, like, 5 or 6 of them.
Who are the equivalent of, like, Primarch tier super characters.
These are supposed to be, like, the big guys kind of thing. You know, like, these are the leaders.
But on a better note, from late 97, we have the Falcon, which gave us the tank body that then, you know, they would add upgrade sprues over time to make the different tanks. And I gotta say, I've never been the biggest fan of the Eldar tank. I thought it's a neat design. It doesn't look like a square box, so I'm always happy about that. It's trying something, and it's not for me, but I'm happy when people are like, I love the Eldar tank, and I'm like, cool.
I think it's a nice design in contrast to human tank.
Yes. However, my respect for it tenfolds when I realize it's from 1997 and is 5 years older than the fucking Rhino.
It's wild.
I've put together more than one Rhino in my life, and that kit sucks. That design is just put the trapezoids together and then slap on the really fiddly tracks. But the Falcon looks pretty decent by comparison, or rather the tank chassis. If I'm being honest, the one I like most is like the Fire Prism, which is the later version, but
like, that's the core of the tank kind of thing with some additions. But 97, for some reason, it just popped into my head, and like, Star Wars Episode 1 was 99.
Yeah.
That feels so old. It's not bad for what it is, but like, obviously it should be updated.
Again, it doesn't need a redesign. It really just needs a check-in update type thing, but it needs it way less than like, focus on those Phoenix Lords and the Warp Spiders and like, focus on the things that look awful. We can have this be like the Rhino where we're shocked later at how old something is. It holds up well enough that that's not the thing that needs the most work. Unless we find out they're like terrible to build, because I haven't tried building one of these yet. I do want to do that episode one day. I think that would be interesting to like actually try to build the worst kit of every faction, or at least some amount of them, as I just realized how many kits that would be.
Yeah, I was like, let's not do that.
We'll do a spot check.
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick look at the sprue.
I'm pretty sure the whole top is one piece, maybe two.
Yes, the whole top is like 2 pieces, but there's like the whole bottom has assembly parts to it. It's obviously the old, lot of wasted space. The connection points are not going to be great, but like, it doesn't look completely fucked.
All right, so real quick, moving on from Craft Worlds, Harlequins.
The amazing faction that is Harlequins.
The very real faction that still exists exists and definitely isn't just smothered under a pillow right now. They definitely weren't just removed from all mention in Kill Team just this week, with a little asterisk at the bottom of the article like, also, Harlequins will exist in Kill Team technically in a free download.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't that many models, and they were all early 2015.
That's the thing, though. They're from 2015. They're, like, much newer than Grey Knights.
Yeah, it's several years.
They're much newer than half of Craftworld's. This army is not a decade old yet. They're dead. This is concerning. This is a lack of faith in GW right here.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
We can make an equivalent point on what happened currently with Deathwatch. Deathwatch is a very strange discussion right now.
Yeah, and I mean, they were 2016.
This is weird to see.
I was wondering when you were, like, bringing up that aspect of thinking that you were going to say, like, they looked bad for being 2015. I was like, You're crazy. You're absolutely fucking insane.
Those models unpainted look good.
Yes.
My brothers are Barrick Plastic for the most part. I did some test paint jobs for him just to, like, have him pick something and maybe pick up a paintbrush one day.
Worthy goal.
As much as, like, their original paint scheme that they put on the box was very fucking stupid because it is incredibly difficult to replicate, Harlequins look good with so many different paint jobs that are in the codex, and they could have chosen literally anything easier for a new person to paint.
And, like, they're nice looking models. Yeah, they are newer, you know, they're not even a decade old yet, but like you said, basically being smothered in the background as we're distracted by other things.
We're talking, and currently GW's in the background like a cartoon, strangling them.
Distracting us with some space marine with a fucking 8-tube rocket launcher.
It's sad because I love the Harlequins. It's such a more interesting faction.
It is.
Why does the cool kid have to die? The wrong kid is dying. He's not even dying, he's being murdered.
Yeah, it was like...
Dad's killing the wrong kid.
Yeah, maybe there's some hope. But moving on to, I guess, Ynnari real quick, because there's a couple models.
Ynnari is a single box from 2017 that is like the Eldar soup faction thing rules that keep shifting.
Yeah, when they're like, hey, Eldar is more than just Craftworld and Drukhari. See, look, we made a box.
And then they split the box into a bunch of online-only items.
It's just...
It's weird because they're from 2017. They were clearly like the new plot point that we were definitely going to follow until Gilliman like moved on from that plot like 3 seconds later, and then we did not follow that plot. It died in the corner.
Yeah, would have been cooler. I guess let's move on to Drukhari, which is like an actual faction range.
And has quite the discussion attached. Hey, Grey Knights, how you doing? In 2011.
In 2011, we're doing stuff. It's showing that we're 2011. How's Drukhari doing?
2010/2011.
Yeah.
So Drukhari got the massive update in 5th edition that gave us the entire Drukhari range as we know it today, with a couple exceptions that have been updated over time. The new Incubi, the new Racks, stuff like that. The entire range is from 2010/2011, much like Grey Knights. About half the range can no longer be purchased anymore because it was all made in Finecast, because someone made a good decision.
I mean, it would have been better if they were like also re-released in plastic.
There is a bunch of, rumor isn't even the right word, but just guesswork, that based off the fact that they tend to look at the Little Brother army, the not a Space Marine in the intro box from the last few sets have all been someone who desperately needs an update but is not a Space Marine. Drukhari still fits the bill very well.
And they're a good like foil against Space Marine.
They're a great villain because like they can make even the Imperium look a little bit sympathetic because they're so mustache twirling hilariously evil that they make a good match.
Very much over the top evil, even in 40K. Like you said, we don't know anything and there isn't even like real leaks or anything, but it would make sense following trends and expectations.
But it could again be something out of left field and be completely unrelated. But Drukhari is definitely at the age where it could use some updates. I'm not even saying everything because like certain kits hold up amazingly well for being how old they are. The Talos Chronos kit is a wonderful kit from 2011. They look good still. To be honest, our bikes, the Reavers are pretty good looking.
They are still obviously older. They don't have quite the same fine detail work that we can see on some of the newer models, but they honestly, a lot of Drukhari models still look good.
Yeah, the vehicles hold up well. I would say about half the non-vehicles hold up very well. I would say the other half could use some updates, and just in general, we could use a bit of a range expansion, nix all the fine cast stuff, and like reimagine it differently.
I think the real big part is you have so many fine casts, or at least had so many fine cast things, and the army isn't really fully fleshed out for its like internal balance kind of thing.
Right. It's a very stereotypical example of the three-pronged army where it's three different designs internally for a pick your own favorite of these, but each of them is very, very bare bones. Like Coven's is 2-3 boxes.
Yeah, and like they're quite a bit different, so it's that much more obvious when you look at the faction.
If you're like me and you don't like witches, or you're like witch players who don't like Covens, you start seeing real quick how few models you have access to.
So as much as, you know, there's the comparison with Grey Knights, I think it's a different problem. Grey Knights looks old when you bring it next to any modern Space Marine. Drukhari has some of that going on, but a lot of it is they just have old finecast models and they need further expansion on the ranges.
And some of the newer stuff that we've gotten, so they updated the Kabalite Warriors with the new sprue in Kill Team. They did the Kill Team release of the new Mandrakes. The stuff we're getting is wonderful in Drukhari. I'd like to see what a 2026 or whatever release of Drukhari could look like.
I think there's a lot of potential there.
I just want to reiterate, as much as I'd love to see this, it holds up shockingly well overall. A lot of this is really good for its time period. All right, let's move on to one of your armies from mine.
Yeah, so Orks is it's an interesting one, just because like Orks have been around forever kind of thing, right? Like
it's also interesting because one of your newest kits is Orc Boys. One of your oldest kits is Orc Boys. But I'm not talking about the same kit.
Yeah, that was one of those, like earlier in the episode, I was like, what's Orc Boys kit release look like? Like the history of the kits. Fuck, dude, that's complicated in ways.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, right. And there isn't really an easy way to find that information out, especially if you're new. You wouldn't even really know what is possible, essentially. Like if you're looking like on eBay or something like that, and you're just like, Orc Boys. You see some shit that's like, that ain't right. So 1999.
That is the release of the Orc Boys that you can still buy today that are not the Monopose new boys. Why we can buy both? Well, let me tell you. They released a new boys kit. It looks beautiful. They are highly detailed, big, awesome looking, super cool, but only half of them are melee. Half of them can only be ranged, and boys get played as either a melee squad or a ranged squad.
It's weird because it seems obvious that you would give those options, and yet I don't know, man. Like the designers and the players clearly were not talking to each other and being like, all right, listen here, you little shit.
The Orc Boys 2021 new kit is like the ultimate proof for those people who are longing for the days of A-posed Marines with a bolter strapped against their chest and going, I can pose him however I want. This boys kit is like the worst thing to have on your side of an argument.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The kit's so bad that even GW is like, we have to sell the old one still. They will mob our offices, no pun intended.
I mean, especially for Orc Boys, because the old kits, as obviously old as they are, have a lot of potential for kit bashing that has been shown throughout the history, essentially, of like, okay, you're gonna grab those and do these things and it'll make a more interesting army, essentially. And to take that away from like just a bits aspect, yeah, it'd be crazy.
It's shocking to me because the exact same codex release, we got the new commandos out of Kill Team with all of the extra bits, all of the extra ways you can build each one, which is like the orc dream, and it's sitting right next to the worst design new kit we've seen.
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense, but I feel like there might have been some type of higher up decisions on, you know, we're going to follow this posing structure, so you have to do that.
I wonder if it's simpler as these boys are the easy to build ones, right, from the intro box. I wonder if there was supposed to be multi-pose boys and something happened and that kit just doesn't exist now.
That would kind of make sense, where it's like, we'll put these in, the combo boxes, easy, and that they are nice. Like, to build, they're fine. They're actually pretty nice. And then, like, we'll release a separate boys box, updated, that has all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, so you can build the full units that make sense.
That would actually be very smart from, like, both a business aspect and a consumer of, I've got boys, but I want the new kit, and I want them to be buildable.
And they do it in Space Marines all the time. They love to do the intro box version of the Space Marines, where they're easy to build and have no options. And then 9 months later, after everyone has run out and bought those, you release the multi-option one, where you've got all sorts of different arms you can tack on there. And one of them has a special weapon that you can't build out of the easy-to-build box.
I mean, that's fucking irritating. That last little bit.
It's horribly irritating, but it's better than the alternative of you never get a sane unit.
So, Orks is weird. Essentially, they've got some old stuff from 99, and honestly, they just have stuff from, like, throughout history.
Like, the mid-aughts is a lot of your knob equivalents.
Yeah, and then you get into, like 2014, you get a bunch of the mech stuff, and then as of, I guess, 2021, you get the squig stuff. So, like, it has a lot of stuff throughout history, and it kind of shows from some of the old ones. Looking at the old Orks on a bike or whatever, or the Ludas, compared to some of the new boys and the new Orks, it's like, oh, what happened? I kind of like it just because Orks is so Ork.
It works because of Ork lore, but I feel like the old versus new is the feeling of, just because the lore has them being funny doesn't mean they have to look like they're from a cartoon. They can be funny and look good. That's
true.
Like, the new mech is one of the most beautiful models ever out of 40K.
It's amazing.
It is so good looking, and yet he has no fucking idea how his gun works.
Yeah, that's about right. He'll make shit up if you ask him.
It's still a perfectly orky orc thing. It's just, it's taken seriously. You don't have to feel like you're playing the joke.
Yeah.
They're still a threat. It's just they're also silly boys. Anyway, Necrons. Back to my army.
All right, let's hear about your amazing Necrons.
Do you like the Khatans, Eric?
Is it just the Khatans? Because fuck those things.
It's tied for, like, the destroyers, too. The Green Rod destroyers.
Yeah. Forgot about those.
Those were all the same release. Back from 2002. They're as old as the Rhino.
And they look like it.
They look every bit as old as they are, or older. They honestly, knowing they're from 2002, you could have said 1996, and I'd look over at, like, the 1994 Eldar range and be like, yeah, that jives. But 2002 almost feels insulting for Banana Man.
Kind of. I feel like some of that is bias, especially because we have an example of a nice looking Khatan, but I mean, the rest of the army,
they're spread throughout history like a lot of the other armies are that are bigger. You've got your big release from 9th edition, obviously, on the tail end, but then in the middle you've got, like, a big release in 2011/2012. You've got a smaller release in 2012/2013 later. There was a sprinkling of little models throughout where it's like, hey, we just made a one little thing, but most of the range was updated in 2020. The bulk of the range that is not from that era is from 2011. That's where you get, like, your Doomsday Arc, your Command Barges, your Immortals, Lich Guard,
Death Marks, and shared kits.
Yeah, Wraiths, Spiders, like, all of the not new ones. And they all hold up pretty well. Death Marks, I still hate the football player look of the basic Death Mark, but that's a minor complaint compared to, like, overall, it's a pretty good aging range.
Yeah, I think the ones from 2011, 2012 era obviously look the part. Like, if they were to be remade now, there would be a decent amount more
little details
on, like these are, like, robots and, like, high-tech guns. That's not just, like, we added, like, 2 little wires between the gun. And, like, they look fine, but it could be better.
When you look at my Necrons up on the shelf where they tend to sit,
yeah, you're not wrong.
It's pretty obvious, like, which era each one came from. You don't hate the ones from 2011. like the big bulk of the range, like those are Necrons. And then you look over at the 2020 Necrons and you're like, those are Necrons who are clearly brand new and are better sculpted Necrons.
Basically.
The range is not bad, like with the exception of obviously the destroyers are ancient. They look it on the shelf. They've got their green rods still. Well, some of them still have green rods. Most of them have fallen out.
Only technically in theory.
The Khatan's look terrible. But enough of that. Let's get into T Glottal Stop Ow.
This is an interesting one to me because my initial impressions of Tau are like, it's a newer army. It feels like a newer army.
For a lot of people, this is the Shrek of 40K, where you go, Shrek was released in 2001 and people, or like the like Shrek was released 10 years ago meme, and then like everyone felt older suddenly.
Exactly.
And now Shrek was released much longer ago. But Tau, coincidentally, from 2001.
I saw that when we were looking at the data and I was like, oh, no, that's not right. It's like, you know, it's not that old. It's a newer army. 2001, man, they had some. It's crazy.
And like, this is where the Devilfish came from, and it holds up pretty well, just like with the Eldar tank. It's an older model. When you put it together, you feel it. But like, when it's put together, you're like, that's a nice looking tank.
Yeah, it has a nice core design style.
But then you look at other stuff like the Firesight team from 2006.
Yeah.
Just technically newer.
Feels like they didn't progress much in those 5 years.
It's fine cast. You can only do so much.
And that's another thing. Like, a lot of the old ones from 2001, 2006 were fine cast.
And a lot of those got updated like last edition or this edition. Or just got nixed into Legends like the named Ethereals did.
Or just, like, go away.
I gotta say, like, looking through the list, Riptide was 2013. If you told me it was like 2016, 17, I'd believe you perfectly.
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of why it feels like it's a newer army, is because I would have assumed like 2015. Again, we started playing, you know, just a couple years ago essentially, so, you know, we don't have that history of, oh yeah, I was playing then, I remember it was a long time ago.
Early 2020 for us, so anything before that was all, it already existed, but I don't know when.
But like, you know, once you've looked at enough of the models, you kind of get this feeling of like, oh, that's old Marine, you know, or that era. But yeah, the Riptide feels like it should be newer than 2013.
Other than those ankles, the worst designed ankles. Such a specific problem with that model. It's so weird. But yeah, it's a range sprinkled throughout time. They had releases in 2001 when they first came out. A lot of the range got updated either in 2006, 2013, 2015.
That's one of the things is like you say sprinkled throughout, and like, yes, but more in like chunks kind of thing of like, hey, we remembered Tau, let's release some models.
Most updates other than like modern kill team updates happened in big chunks. They wouldn't just release one new kit. The only time they did that was for like, here's one character, we remembered you this edition, go away.
That's true. But yeah, interesting. 2001 Tyranids.
No, let's real quick do Genestealers because it's very boring. It is a new range. Basically the entire thing came out in 2016 through 2019 in like two big chunks. The oldest models is half the range. They all came out in 2016. It was like the original launch. That's where your Goliath truck's from, your Patriarch, your Neophytes, your Acolytes, all those are from the same period.
And then again, they were revisited in 2018, 2019 really, and they got basically everything else.
And that's the current range more or less. But now we can end on Tyranids for something with a little more meat on it. I expect if I had you sit there on the current Tyranid page on GW, you could identify pretty quickly what the oldest model is. Spoilers, it's the Carnifex. It's 5 years older than the next oldest model that still gets sold.
I still like it, but it has an obvious difference in style even, kind of. It looks old. So like Tyranids has the release from 2005 Carnifex, but then it's 2010, then 2014, a couple, and then the new, 2023. So really there aren't that many like eras, and luckily most of the old is gone. It's basically just Carnifex.
Yeah, basically everything that was outdated looking got updated in the newest batch. I will say the Carnifex is like still one of my favorite Tyranid looks.
It's cool. It's just obvious.
It is obviously older than the rest, but it is a wonderful design. I like the like Kazakh's forward leaning bug monster with big scythe arms. Like there's something so good and giant bug monster about it that like certain Tyranids feel more normal. Like, I always think of the Lictor, where I'm like, that's just like Alien from Alien type stuff.
Sure.
Whereas, like, the Carnifex feels like giant bug.
I think you can see that there are, like, test model kind of things of, like, we're going to do something a bit wild on this one.
Which Tyranids lore allows you to do. Like, it's great for that.
And I think most of those actually are the ones I enjoy more because it's like, it's nice to have the, like, generic bug. It is a swarm of bug kind of things. That's good. But it's like, all right, this is like cosmic, galaxy spanning awfulness. Let's show it kind of thing. And let's get a little weird.
You get your safe designs like Tyranid warriors. Then you get your more out there stuff. I'm thinking things like neurothrope, zoanthropes.
I mean, even just like the Pyrovore. It's a giant cannon that's like biological.
Attached to like a spider crab.
Yeah. It's kind of weird. So honestly, like Tyranids, mostly because they just were the little brother army and they got massive refresh, they're in a good spot for most of their stuff from an age and looks old viewpoint kind of thing.
Okay, ignoring the Carnifex part. The 2010 era is your Trigun / Moloch. Yeah, the kit is clearly old when you actually handle it, but the end result looks very good. The gargoyles, little cartoony proportions, but they hold up okay. A lot better than the old Gaunts did, which is why the Gaunt upgrade is great.
Yes.
The Tyrannofex still looks fine. The Swarm Lord is way too small still and really does need an update, but the design is great. It's just, oh boy, when you put a Swarm Lord next to other things, you're like, no wonder a single Space Marine took this down in the lore. How is this a big threat?
Yeah, it kind of doesn't seem as scary as it should. But like you said, the design is good. It's just a scaling issue, essentially. And, you know, they could add a little bit here and there. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
All right, well, that wraps up all the factions. I would like to make one last shout out of, like, if you're bored on the internet and you have access to the wikis, this is the type of stuff that I'd love to see get added and expanded upon that I never seem to be able to find easily. Like, if it wasn't for this one random Redditor doing this much work that I hope the information is right because I can't go check it, we wouldn't be able to do an episode like this. And it's something that was really fun. So this is just the type of thing that's, like, noticeably lacking.
Right, and it's one of those, like, really it shouldn't all be on like one person, which is why wikis that are community driven work out so well. You know, it's got to start somewhere, I guess.
And this is just on the 40K side. I know that there's like an equivalent thread that exists of everything on the fantasy side of things. I've seen Vince Frentorella do it in an episode where he used it. So I'm sure people could update that side of things too, and that has a real long history as well. But anyway, I guess that's your call to action instead of the usual like, comment, subscribe stuff of like, hey, maybe go help the community. But also if you do the YouTube pleasantries, that helps
also,
too.
Yeah. Nice. Sneaky.
Saved it right at the end. I remembered to do the YouTuber thing. Anyway, that's the end of the topic though. Do remember, if you like this type of stuff and you want like 2 more hours of us this week, there's the unlisted episode you can go watch. Again, details below. Before we get out of here though, we have to shout out our top patrons for the month. They are 100 Johnny,
3D Frank,
4K Fart,
99 Nines,
Adrian Franke,
Alex Fuja,
Bedlam's Nemesis,
Beth Jesus,
Cameron Cairns Baker,
Cameron R. It lined up perfectly.
God damn. Choke Me Bratty,
Christian Truelius Vickland,
Christopher Gargliano,
Chroma Vale,
Chuck Mordock,
Craig Judge,
Cube 1359,
Daniel Han,
Devin Valaise,
Dominic Colasico,
Duskers,
Edward Lawrence,
Ethan Gerard,
Exodia Wannabe,
Azelvor,
Farseer Levithril,
Finn Smileys,
Gathering Clouds,
Gyarados,
Happy Brontosaurus,
Hellfire,
Hyperion TV,
Ian,
Jacob Gibson,
Jarrett DePerna,
Jadon,
Calyx,
Lucas,
Leboop Boop,
Logan Benach,
LSJ,
Madison Ramanama,
Matthew Tsushima,
Michael Melcher,
Mixolodius,
Burnt Toast.
Moist Toast,
It's nice that those line up. Monkey 218,
Moorfield 55,
Nikki,
Owlbee Bark,
Pierce is testing the Patreon name character limit,
you didn't find it, Proteus 7331,
Retro Brave,
Rookie XP,
Ross Warlock,
Samuel Summerfield,
Sarah Hansen,
Spinal,
Squareson,
Steven Solcombe,
The Marine Who Plays Tau,
The Crusader 13,
Thrango,
Vartha Mark,
Vault Guardian,
Vic Lahina,
Warm Hotcakes,
Why So Mad 2. And as always, we need to thank our producers. They are Blisted Brain,
Brandon Janke,
Demolition Man,
Dr. Lace,
Yon Geisy,
Kiwi Fruitbird,
Lord Partridge II,
Michael DeLulo,
NJ Harlan,
North,
Rock,
Scott Gray,
Stephen Bingham,
the fucking God Emperor of Mankind,
The Mailman,
Timothy Cody,
and Wargame Simulator. Thank you all so much for keeping this show running.
Yes, thank you so much.
Now, let's get out of here.
Sounds good.